First of all, I just want to introduce myself and the team. My name's Harry. I'll be chairing the debate tonight. This is the 12th event that Adam and I, and now everyone else in the York Union team, have put together in the last couple of years. It's the third one this term, and we've got another couple coming up. We have Alison Campbell coming on Friday, and then we have John Snow next week, so I hope you'll join us for those. As for tonight, let me firstly explain how we're going to do this. So we'll have about half an hour to start where each of our speakers will make an 8-minute speech, or up to an 8-minute speech. And then we'll go to Q&A for about half an hour. It's your chance to get involved. And then towards the end, we'll have about 10-15 minutes for everyone to wrap up, where each speaker will make a 2-minute closing speech. Now, during that time, we'll have a Twitter hashtag going. It's Maggie York. We thought that was suitably short, better than Thatcher. Please do tweet. I will be monitoring the account on here, and I will bring in your comments, at least some of them hopefully. And finally, I'll explain how the voting works. So you all cast a ballot as you came in. We now have those results. I'll announce them in just a moment. And then at the end, we'll vote by hand to speed up the process and see how those things have changed. Remember, when you vote, you're voting on the quality of the arguments made here tonight rather than anything else. And now let me introduce our guests. So for the opposition, Thatcherism must be abandoned to save the British economy. We firstly have Vidhya Alekson. Vidhya is the Deputy Chief Executive of the UK's possibly #1 think tank. It certainly was recently voted so by Prospect Magazine, and that's Resolution Foundation. They are considered to have led the way on the cost of living crisis, which some people attribute to the Thatcherite consensus. And she will be our first speaker for the opposition this evening. Proposition, even. On the opposite side of the bench, we have Mark Littlewood, who is currently Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Number 2. I shouldn't be making such partial judgments. Milton Friedman, the renowned economist, once said that without the IEA, I doubt very much whether there would have been a Thatcherite revolution. We'll have to hear Mark's take on that this evening. And back to the proposition, we have Stefan Stern, who is works across different roles. He's a visiting professor at the management practice at Cass Business School. He formerly worked for the FT, writing on management and politics, and until recently was Director of Strategy at Edelman, the management consultancy. And finally, we have Martin van der Weer, who's a British financial journalist, business editor of The Spectator, and has written widely across various publications from the Sunday Telegraph to the Daily Mail over recent years. And firstly, thank you all for coming very much. Wonderful. You could join our team of speakers. And finally, just to say that after the event, if you haven't donated, it would be great if you could, if you think it's worthwhile. And there will be a small wine reception if you'd like to hang around. And without further ado, let's start the evening.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This House believes Thatcherism must be abandoned to save Britain's economy. I would contend that an over-reliance on the tenets of Thatcherism lie at the heart of this country's economic problems, and that abandoning the over-reliance on the market and the fetish of the small state is essential to our economic future. We are, as you know, coming out of the longest downturn this country has seen in its history, and its roots lie very much in a financial crisis which started with the deregulation of the city and of financial services. It was a belief started under Thatcher that unfettered markets were the engine of growth that have seen the most significant collapse in living standards that this country has ever faced. Ordinary working families in Britain today will be no better off in 2018 than they were in 2008. An unregulated, unfettered financial sector has resulted in a lost decade of living standards for ordinary families. And the public sector debt that this government has been trying so hard to reduce has failed to come down as expected, because this downturn has been so long and so protracted, because we hung on to beliefs that were started by Thatcher and are sending us down the wrong road. And as you will all have heard in the last couple of days, we're on the path to recovery. So you may think, what's she talking about? The economy's recovering, the Conservative-led government Holding on to these Thatcherite principles is leading us down the right path. But this recovery is anything but a vindication for Thatcherism. It's a recovery built not on any growth in real wages or incomes. It's based on a shallow, fragile recovery where people are dipping into savings and the housing market is driving much of what we see as growth. Consumption is increasing because people are saving less, but there's no uptick in business investments. And what that means, if incomes fail to grow and wages don't pick up, is that this is an economy that will be in recovery for only a short period of time. This is a fragile recovery, and without a real change in that, this won't be sustained for very much longer. And at the heart of that is a massive growth in inequality that began in the 80s and has continued ever since. Leave the market unchecked, without representation for workers, and in many sectors what emerges is a highly unequal distribution of income. The top 1% in the UK account for 10% of income, and the bottom 50% only 18%. And you might think that's a moral problem, but that's more than that, it's an economic problem. In an economy like ours that's driven by consumption, if the incomes at the bottom don't grow, then the economy can only struggle, because the people at the very bottom are the very ones who spend. They don't have money to save. They are the big consumers. It's ordinary families, ordinary working families on the high street, spending on the high street that are the critical economic engine. And this problem with growing inequality and a lack of income going to those in the bottom half, those who drive the economy, who spend, who use their money, predates the crisis. This is a phenomenon that started in the 2000s that has been driven by a massive growth in inequality that began under Thatcher in the 1980s. And what have people done to try and overcome this? Well, they've borrowed, and we all know that towards the end of the boom years, people were borrowing and borrowing. You could borrow any amount. Credit card things were coming through your door every day saying, how much money do you want to borrow? People were taking out 100% mortgages. They were trying to make up for those lost living standards through debt. And as a result, we've accumulated trillions of pounds of debt. And actually, much of that has not been paid off. So underneath this new emerging recovery is actually not just a fragility because incomes aren't growing. It's a real fragility because people, as a result of this huge inequality, are swimming in debt. And as soon as interest rates rise, which they won't tomorrow, but they will soon, that debt will come back to bite. There are 600,000 families in Britain who are already, with historically low interest rates, paying more than half of their income in debt repayments. So my first point, ladies and gentlemen, is that a belief in the market, the Thatcherite vision that markets driven by competition would lead to growth, has in actual fact in the UK led to highly unequal society, which actually underpins a very unstable economy, and the likelihood that we'll return to growth is actually hindered by that inequality that lies at the heart of our economy. And then what of the small state? So Thatcher argued for a smaller state. The state should get out of the way, leave the economy to prosper. That public spending crowds out the private sector, and the private sector is, after all, she would have argued, the engine of growth. But the small state is not intrinsically better. Why is 38% of GDP better than 39%? Just because it's smaller. The question is, what do we want the state to do? And if we look at our economy, what we see is the retraction of the state has left a poor economic legacy. First of all, jobs. The UK has more low-paid jobs than most other developed countries in the world. A fifth of workers in the UK are low-paid. And what jobs are growing? Low-paid jobs. The boom in jobs that we're seeing, that the government is reporting on so favourably, many of those jobs are not the well-paid, secure jobs you'd hope for. They're low-paid, they're insecure. Some of them are low-paid, self-employed jobs rather than people moving into employment. And now, is this the place from which we're going to compete on the international stage? I would argue in a globalised world, we're being left to compete at the bottom of the trough, where we should be competing in the higher skilled middle of the economy. And to do that, what we would need is an active state, an industrial policy, a state that invests in R&D, that shapes skills, that actually moves the economy out today's low wage, low productivity equilibrium to something where people can aspire to better pay, better jobs, better security. But if you retrench the state, you end up with the shape of the economy that we have. And that has a regional dimension, as I'm sure you know, up here in Yorkshire and Humber. The loss to the economy here that started in the 80s is continuing. There's been a greater loss here in other regions of the north than there has been in London and the southeast. There's been no loss of value in the southeast, while regions in the north have suffered. And that's continuing a trend that's damaged the economies outside of London and the southeast for years now, and is still continuing. Is that my 1 minute sign?
That is your
I was wondering how you're going to do that. And let me just finish by pointing out a few other areas where retrenchment of the state is leaving us spending more, not less. Housing. We're in the biggest housing crisis we've ever had. We've built fewer homes year on year since the Second World War than we need, and that's now at a point of crisis. Housing is unaffordable and unavailable, and not just in London and the South East. There are hotspots all over the country. And how did we get here? It's because we started selling off housing assets that we had built, that the government had built, through Right to Buy, which was a policy to give people the right to own their own home, which was great. But where was the building to replace the homes that people then bought? And what we've ended up with now is a bill of billions of pounds of housing benefit. We no longer spend any money on building homes, a very small amount. We spend billions on subsidising rent, unaffordable rents. We spend billions on money that goes to landlords just to make housing affordable. And there are many other areas, but I've got to leave Stefan something to say, so I'll stop there. Thank you.